Have we got a deal with the EU?
There is no final deal as yet. We are in the very final hours. I always expected it to go to the wire because we are negotiating extremely hard in the national interest. And what we are looking to deliver tomorrow is a deal that's going to be good for jobs, that's going to help to secure our borders, and is going to help to lower household bills. That's the negotiation I'm still in these final hours. And we will not sign a deal that isn't in our national interest.
Oh, well, that's interesting because, there's always got to be a winner of the cup final, there's got to be a pope and so on. But there doesn't have to be a deal. Is it possible that we could emerge from tomorrow with no deal? Because EU's motto has been, there's no deal until there's a whole deal.
Look, I'm confident that we can get a deal, but that doesn't mean that we would ever sign anything that isn't in our national interest. But what we've been doing, working extremely hard on this, is pushing everything to the limit, negotiating very hard. That's exactly what the British people would expect of us as we seek to deliver the promises that we made in our manifesto last year, the pledges we made to reset our relationship with the European Union and to deliver for the British people.
But we know that Brussels are pretty ruthless when it comes to negotiating, and they could walk away or say we're going to delay it. So you can't guarantee that there will be a deal by tomorrow afternoon.
Nobody can guarantee anything when you have two parties in a negotiation, but we've certainly been taking what I've called a ruthlessly pragmatic approach. We want to emerge with a deal, as I say, that we can say makes our borders more secure, is good for jobs and growth, and is bringing people's household bills down. That is what is in our national interest, and that's what we'll continue to do over these final few hours.
So actually you're aiming for a large deal rather than maybe a smaller one that would be easy to negotiate?
We want a deal that makes a difference for the British people. We have a mandate.
Comprehensive?
We have a mandate to do it in the areas that we promised in our manifesto, whether that is around, as I say, security in the very changed and dangerous environment we find ourselves in internationally, whether it's in terms of working together more closely on serious and organised crime, including illegal migration, but also, crucially, jobs and growth. Growth is the number one mission of this government. We want to be putting money in people's pockets, and we want a deal that is good for business, good for jobs.
How much do you think this deal, if it goes through, will increase GDP by? We hear numbers like 4%, 2%. What are you looking for?
Well, look, you can always have these different projections, but what we are looking to do is to make sure that on trade we can have that smoother trade across the channel. And I'm hesitating to put any figures on it. We haven't got a final deal yet.
But let me just have an order of of numbers. 2%, 20%, 50%, what?
Well, let me just explain the issues here that we are trying to solve. We have a situation where leading supermarkets are calling out for a deal on things like food and drink products. Why? Because we have lorries stuck for 16 hours and food rotting. The current deal isn't good for our producers, our farmers, who have just got red tape, paperwork preventing them being able to export their goods. British people who, in the security environment we find, could find themselves with better law enforcement tools and finding themselves safer. So we are trying to deal with a status quo that isn't working for the British people, and we'll seek to improve it.
Well, let's take that point about supermarkets. Prime Minister says that you're going to get a deal that will reduce the cost of product in supermarkets. How and by how much?
So with respect to a deal on agricultural products, on food and on drink, we promised in our manifesto that we would seek to negotiate a deal like that. We've got a democratic mandate to do it. Now, at the moment, what you've had are different businesses wanting to export into the EU. Some, by the way, have just stopped exporting altogether because it's just there's simply too much paperwork, too much red tape. The different certifications that you've got to go and get now, and everything that comes with that is putting costs on our businesses. It is clearly in our national interest, in our economic interest.
I get the process, but I'm not quite hearing the result. How much can I expect to save on my shopping basket as a result of the deal that you hope to negotiate?
Well, look, we will have to get to the very final deal first. But what we want to create, as I say, is a deal that is going to going to reduce costs, reduce paperwork, reduce red tape. I know you're trying to draw me.
Food is going to be in the deal.
I know if we are able to secure a successful deal, we've said throughout that we are seeking to negotiate a deal on agricultural food products, food and drink, and we have a mandate to do it.
All right. The other thing that you talked about is queues. You say that it's going to be better for British families on holiday. Does that mean that I get to go through the EU queue if I want to go on holiday to France or Germany?
We're certainly looking at measures that are going to assist in that regard. You'll appreciate...
Well, there's only two options. There's all passports and there's EU.
Yes, precisely.
Do I get to go in the EU or not?
Trevor, I would love to see you being able to go through the border more quickly in that way, and that's certainly something we've been pushing with the EU, and I think that will be something that will be very helpful to British people. We want British people who are going on holiday to be able to go and enjoy their holiday and not be stuck in queues.
Is that going to be in the deal, though? I mean,
Trevor, it is in the national interest for me to negotiate with the EU across your television show, important though your television show is on a Sunday morning. But certainly...
I just want to know that you want to see all British holiday makers going through the airport faster, not just me.
Certainly we do. Certainly we want to see British holiday makers, British travellers going through those queues more quickly, yes.
OK, let's talk about what's not in the deal. Fishing?
Well, on fishing, what we have always said is that we will act in the best interests of our fishers. We want to see emerging a deal that is good for them. And just, we've been talking about a deal on food and drink. One of the issues that our fishers have faced is additional red tape when they are exporting to the EU market. But it is also important that we are good stewards of our marine environment, that we are looking after our seas and oceans. So they are the objective.
Does that mean not letting French boats into our waters? Because that's a sticking point, isn't it? The French want to take British fish.
Well, the position we've always taken on fish is we were left with a situation by the last government where the 5 years that they had negotiated comes to an end next year. So whoever was in government at this stage would have to deal with that issue. But the objectives, as I say, we've always set is an overall deal in the interest of our fishers, an easier access to markets to sell our fish. And as I say, secondly, looking after our oceans. Those are the objectives that we've consistently followed in the negotiation.
All right, well, look, let's turn to, if you might call it the third rail of this, which is free movement or not. The Prime Minister says that you have an agreement on a youth mobility scheme in the papers today. Am I correct?
Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So that's the situation with regard to that. But what I've said, what the Prime Minister...
But it's on the table.
What I've said and what the Prime Minister has said is that we would be open to a smart, controlled youth mobility scheme. But I should set out, we will not return to freedom of movement. We've currently got 13 youth mobility schemes with countries at the moment.
I get that, but let me tell you why this is so mysterious to me. And I'm going to play you a clip now of your colleague Yvette Cooper talking to me in that chair just a few weeks ago. How are you getting on with negotiating a youth mobility scheme with the EU?
Well, we've been clear that we need net migration to come down. Under the Conservatives, net migration quadrupled in the space of 4 years. That was the wrong thing for the UK. So we're clear that net migration needs to come down. So that's why this is not an approach that we are looking for.
So no youth mobility scheme?
That's not the right starting point for us at all, because what we need to do is to bring net migration down.
So if you get a youth mobility scheme in this agreement, when is Yvette Cooper going to resign?
Yvette Cooper is doing an absolutely fantastic job as...
Yeah, but she's not doing the job that... You're not doing the job she wants you to do, which is, this is not an approach.
No, we've said we would listen to sensible EU proposals.
She just said this is not an approach we want.
No, what Yvette Cooper is saying there, and is absolutely the policy of the government, is that we are going to reduce the level of net migration. And anything that was agreed on youth mobility, which, by the way, would be opportunities for young British people to experience different cultures, to travel and work. Anything we agree will be consistent.
I know you want me to deflect from this.
No, let me answer your question directly. Anything that was agreed would be consistent with the objective of the Migration White Paper, which is to bring the level of net migration down. And that's absolutely what
Yvette Cooper is extremely skilled at doing these interviews. And that was as clear a statement as I've ever heard from her on anything, which was that the youth mobility scheme is not an approach that we want to take. That was a few weeks ago. The position's obviously changed. So what did you get in return for agreeing to the youth mobility scheme that she so clearly did not want?
Well, it's a package with the European Union. It is about an overall package that works for Britain.
And what have you got in response?
But in terms, it doesn't work in that way.
It's a compliment to you that you managed to get something out of them. We just want to know what it is.
No, it is about getting an overall balanced package that works for Britain, that works for jobs, works for borders and gets people's bills down. But specifically in relation to this, the government is 100% behind the objective of getting net migration down. Those are the measures, the purpose of the measures we set out in the Migration White Paper last week.
Right.
And that is the excellent work that Yvette Cooper is doing at the Home Office.
All right. If there is a youth mobility scheme, will there be a cap on the numbers?
We've said it has to be controlled. It has to be smart and controlled. Forgive me for not being drawn any further, Trevor, and negotiating across your show. But as a matter of principle,
if there isn't a cap, it's unfettered.
No.
I mean, there were more than 1 million young people who came to this country from the EU between 2004 and 2015. If there isn't a cap, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, it has to be controlled. I've said that has to be controlled, absolutely. But the point I would make again is the promise we've made is not come back to freedom of movement. We have, for example, a youth mobility scheme with, say, Uruguay, for example. Nobody says that we have freedom of movement with Uruguay.
We're talking about a million people coming here from Uruguay.
We're talking about a smart, controlled scheme, and that's what we are negotiating forward.
All right. Just one small thing about diplomatic niceties. Last week, the Prime Minister went to Albania, said that we were in negotiation with the Albanians about sending failed asylum seekers there, only to be contradicted on the spot, in public, by the Albanian Prime Minister. I hope we're not heading for another awkward moment in which he says there's a deal and the EU boss, von der Leyen, pops up and says, no, there isn't.
Well, look, in terms of the relationship with Albania, I mean, what was agreed as a result of the Prime Minister's visit is that we will continue to deepen the work that we are doing together on forensic evidence with Albania. That will mean, by the way, fewer dangerous criminals on our streets here. So
you didn't get him to say, yes, we're going to do a third country deal.
Well, with regard to the third country deal on offshore processing, the government is looking at a range of options on that because the government is seeking to deal with this problem of illegal migration. That's what the British people expect of us, and that's exactly what we're doing. All right.
Let me ask you just very quickly about a couple of other things. Part of the deal that you've been negotiating concerns security, particularly in the light of Ukraine.
Yes.
Do you agree with Mr. Trump that nothing is going to happen until he and Mr. Putin meet face to face?
Look, I do think that it is the ball is very much in Vladimir Putin's court. And let's be fair, Vladimir Putin could stop this war today if he wanted to in Ukraine after his illegal invasion in 2022. President Trump has made clear that he wants peace. That is the objective of the United Kingdom and countries across Europe. It is Vladimir Putin who is failing to come to the table. And that is what should happen. The challenge is to Putin. If Putin wants peace, he's the one who has to do that.
Well, the reason I ask this question is that if it is the case that it depends on a meeting between Trump and Putin, what is the point of all these heavily publicised minuets between Macron and Merz and Starmer and Zelensky? It all depends on Trump, doesn't it? So why are they all waltzing around European capitals pretending that they make a difference?
It depends on both. It depends on the United States, but it also depends upon Europe stepping up on defence. That's exactly what this government is doing, spending 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2027. And the real leadership role the Prime Minister has been showing on leadership with other European nations and the United States on the coalition of the willing in Ukraine. It's taking Europe and the United States working together. But the issue is with Vladimir Putin.
Overnight, there's been bombing in Gaza. What is our government's position now? What are we saying to the Israelis?
Well, look, deeply distressing scenes and stories again overnight. The situation in Gaza is intolerable. We have to see a ceasefire. We have to see humanitarian aid getting into Gaza and the hostages being released. And whilst a two-state solution has seemed so distant at times in recent years, that remains the only viable solution, and that's what we've got to continue to press for.
Just last question before we go, just a domestic question really, small point. All the newspapers I read yesterday were saying that you're about to U-turn on the winter fuel allowance cut. Are they wrong?
Well, look, that was a difficult decision the government had to take because of the awful state of public services and the £22 billion black hole that we inherited. We, of course, protected the very poorest by means testing winter fuel. People on pension credit could still get it. We, of course, increased the household support fund as well. But that remains the policy. It was a decision that we had to take due to the situation we inherited.
So no reconsideration?
Well, look, around conversation, if there are conversations about reconsideration, I'm sure you'd understand, Trevor, with the work I've been doing on the negotiations, I wouldn't be a part of those.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.